Before we begin, find a comfortable position, whether lying down or sitting, and allow your body to settle into the surface beneath you. There is nowhere you need to be right now. Nothing you need to do except listen and rest. Tonight's story takes us to a caravanserai along the ancient tea road, a shelter built from stone and time where travelers have rested for centuries, and we will spend the evening hours there preparing for sleep through 3 quiet rituals that have been performed by countless others before us. The story moves slowly, as evening should, with time to notice small details, textures and scents and sounds that fill the space between sunset and sleep. And there is no urgency in any of it, no tension or conflict, only the gentle progression from activity to rest, from waking to dreaming. The caravanserai waits for us in the desert twilight, its courtyard already cooling as the day's heat releases from the stones, and we will join others who have arrived seeking shelter, sharing the communal space where merchants and pilgrims and wanderers gather, each on their own journey, but connected by the common need for rest. We will prepare tea in the old way, knead bread dough for tomorrow's breakfast, lay out sleeping mats in the main hall, and through these simple tasks, we will find ourselves settling, our minds quieting, our bodies releasing the accumulated tension of travel and effort. The story has no destiny except sleep itself, no purpose except to guide you gently toward that state of complete surrender, and you can let go of any expectation except that you will be held safely through the night. So take a deep breath now, feeling the air fill your lungs completely, and then release it slowly, letting your shoulders drop, your jaw relax, your thoughts begin to slow. We are about to enter the caravanserai together, crossing the threshold from the world of doing into the world of being. And the journey from here will be measured not in miles, but in moments, not in destinations reached, but in tensions released. Let the story carry you wherever it needs to. Trust that it knows the way and allow yourself to rest. Tonight, we prepare the caravanserai for rest, folding the day into stillness, one gesture at a time. The sun has dropped behind the dunes, leaving the sky washed in violet and amber, and already the courtyard stones hold the memory of heat without burning to the touch. We move slowly through the archways, our feet whispering against packed earth that generations of travelers have smoothed before us. The lanterns wait unlit along the walls, their brass casings cool in our palms, and we carry them to the central fountain, where the oil jars stand in their niches. There is no hurry here, only the rhythm of hands performing tasks they have known for seasons beyond counting. We breathe in the evening air, warm still but gentler now, scented with distant wood smoke and the faint perfume of tea leaves drying on reed mats somewhere in the inner rooms. The courtyard empties of motion as the last merchants secure their bundles and the camels settle into their soft, groaning songs of contentment. We light the first lantern, watching the flame catch and steady, casting amber loops across the fountain's rim. The fountain murmurs its distant hymn, fed by an underground chant, runs cold from mountain springs 2 days' journey to the north. Water here is a gift measured carefully, poured into shallow, never wasted, always blessed. We dip our fingers into the basin, feeling the coolness spread up our wrists, washing that clings to along the tea road. The tiles around the fountain are painted in blues and greens, patterns of vines and stars that seem to shift in the lantern light. Never quite the same twice. Someone set these tiles 300 years ago, mixing pigments from ground stones, and the colors have deepened rather than faded, drinking in the moisture that rises We dry our hands on the linen cloth that hangs beside the basin, rough woven and sun-bleached, and the fabric carries the scent of sage from the drying yard. Above us, swallows dart through the archway, returning to their mud nests tucked into the eaves, their wings cutting the air with soft whistles. We watch them settle, one by one, tucking beaks beneath wings. In the kitchen courtyard, the tea master is already at work, though work is perhaps too brisk a word for what unfolds here. He kneels before the low brazier, arranging coals with iron tongs, building a nest of ember that will hold steady heat for hours without flaring. The kettle waits nearby, round-bellied copper worn smooth by decades of handling, and he fills it from the cistern with a wooden dipper, measuring by instinct rather than mark. The water makes a hollow sound as it enters the kettle, a single note that seems to linger in the cooling air. He sets the kettle on its tripod over the coals, adjusting the height with small wedges of stone until he is satisfied with the distance between flame and metal. We watch the first wisps of steam begin to rise, thin as spider silk, and the tea master nods once before turning to the tea itself. The leaves rest in a wooden chest lined with rice paper, compressed bricks of dark tea that smell of earth and smoke, and something faintly sweet like dried fruit left too long in the sun. Tea traveled this road in bricks like these for centuries, carried on the backs of horses and camels, traded for silk and spices and news from distant cities. The compression kept the leaves fresh through mountain passes where snow fell even in summer, protected them from moisture in the river valleys where fog rolled thick. We have heard stories of tea caravans that stretched for miles, hundreds of animals moving as one creature, their bells creating a music that announced them hours before they appeared on the horizon. The tea master breaks a corner from one brick, crumbling it between his palms, and the leaves release their scent more fully now, filling the small courtyard of fragrance both grounding and mysterious. He measures the tea into a clay pot, one that has brewed thousands of pots before this one, its interior stained dark and glossy, seasoned by years of tannins soaking into porous clay. The pot holds heat well, keeping tea warm through long conversations that stretch past midnight, and its spout pours clean without dripping. The water in the copper kettle begins to sing, a low humming that rises in pitch as bubbles form along the bottom, not yet boiling, but approaching that threshold. The tea master listens with his whole body, head tilted slightly. The pitch reaches the note he knows. He lifts the kettle from the coals with a folded cloth. He pours the water over the tea leaves in a spiral, starting at the center and moving outward, the stream steady and thin, and the leaves unfurl slowly, releasing their color into the water like ink dispersing through clear liquid. The clay pot darkens from the inside out, and he replaces the lid, setting the pot aside to steep in its own time. Steam escapes from the small hole in the lid, carrying that earthy scent into the evening air where it mingles with wood smoke and the last traces of cooking spices from the evening meal. We sit on low cushions arranged around the brazier, our backs against the cool wall, and wait without impatience for the tea to ready itself. While the tea steeps, we prepare the main hall for the night, unrolling mats that have been stored during the day against the eastern wall. The mats are woven from rushes gathered along the river's edge 2 valleys away, dried in the sun until they hold no moisture, then plaited tight, practiced in the pattern. Each mat is as long as a tall person lying down, as wide as shoulders need, and thick enough to cushion hip and shoulder from the stone floor without being so soft that the body sinks. We lay them in rows, leaving space between each without stepping on someone else's, and the mats make a gentle rasping sound as they unfold, a whisper of dried rememberings. The floor beneath is swept clean already, but we sweep again with a broom of bundled twigs, pushing the finest dust toward the doorway where it catches in the evening breeze and disperses into the darkening courtyard. The repetitive motion of sweeping becomes its own meditation. The soft scratch of twigs on stone, the slight resistance as bristles find the grooves between pavings. At the head of each mat, we place a small cushion stuffed with wool from the mountain sheep that graze high pastures where snow lingers until midsummer. The wool is carded, but not spun, left in its natural crimp that traps air and holds warmth. And each cushion is covered in fabric dyed the color of terracotta, faded now to something a color between rust and sand. The cushions smell faintly of lanolin and cedar. The chests where they rest during the day lined with chips of aromatic wood to keep moths away. We position them carefully, not too far from the wall, not too close to the center, where morning light will spill through the high windows, disturb sleep too early. The hall transforms row by row from empty space into a room ready to hold dreams, and the transformation requires nothing more than these simple elements repeated: mat, cushion, space, mat, cushion, space. The rhythm of placement mirrors the rhythm of breath, and by the time the last mat is laid, the room feels inhabited already by the promise of rest. In the corner, where the Qibla is marked by a subtle niche in the wall, we light incense, not the heavy, perfumed kind that overwhelms, but something gentler, sandalwood ground with a hint of rose. The smoke rises in a thin column, barely visible except where lantern light catches it, and the scent spreads slowly through the hall, settling into fabric and wool like a blessing whispered too quietly to hear, but felt nonetheless. Incense has been used here as long as the Caravanserai has stood, which, according to the inscription carved above the main gate, is 270 years, though local memory suggests the stones are older, repurposed from an earlier structure whose purpose is now forgotten. We have been told that travelers used to leave small offerings in the incense corner, bits of bread or dried fruit, tokens of gratitude for safe passage, and though the custom has faded, the space still holds a quality of reverence that makes us lower our voices when we pass. The smoke drifts across the ceiling beams, dark wood aged to nearly black, carved with simple geometric patterns that cast shadows within shadow. The tea master appears in the doorway, carrying a tray with a clay pot and several small cups, each one no larger than the bowl of a palm, handleless and plain. He moves with the careful balance of someone who has carried countless trays across countless, and we make space for him beside the brazier where coals still glow, their light pulsing gently like a heartbeat made visible. He sets the tray down on a low table worn smooth by years of elbows and cups, and begins to pour, filling each cup 3/4 full, the liquid dark as night and steaming faintly. The cups are warm to hold, and we wrap both hands around them, feeling the heat seep into our palms and up through our wrists. The first sip is too hot to take fully, so we breathe in the steam instead, letting the scent fill our lungs, earthy and complex and strangely calming. When we finally taste the tea, it is smooth despite its darkness, with none of the bitterness that comes from leaves steeped too long or water boiled too hard, and it leaves a sweetness at the back of the throat that lingers after swallowing. We sit in a loose circle around the brazier and the tea tray, conversation minimal, nothing that requires response or decision, Only the occasional observation about the evening or a question about tomorrow's weather. The silence between words is comfortable, filled with the small sounds of the caravanserai settling into night, the distant lowing of camels, the creak of wooden shutters as they are secured, the soft pad of footsteps on stone, the whisper of wind through the date palms that grow in the corner of the courtyard where a crack in the stone to collect. These sounds create a tapestry of normalcy, each thread familiar, and together they weave something larger than any single element, a sense of safety that needs no walls to reinforce it. We refill our cups when they empty, the tea master pouring without asking, watching the level in the pot to know when it is time to brew more. The night deepens around us, the sky beyond the courtyard now fully dark, scattered with stars that seem close enough to touch in the clear desert air. After tea, we move to the second ritual of the evening, the preparation of bread for tomorrow's breakfast, though the dough itself will sleep through the night as we do, rising slowly in the coolness that settles. The bread oven stands in its own alcove, the kitchen courtyard, a domed structure built from clay mixed with straw, its interior blackened by decades of fire, its exterior pale as bone under the starlight. We gather the ingredients in wooden bowls, flour ground from wheat that grew in terraced fields where irrigation channels carry snowmelt from distant peaks, salt harvested from the flats 3 days' ride to the west, water from the fountain, and a small piece of dough saved from yesterday's baking, wrapped in damp linen to keep the yeast alive. The process of mixing requires no measurement, only the knowledge held in hands that have done this countless times, adding water gradually until the flour becomes a shaggy mass, then kneading until it transforms into something smooth and elastic that springs back when pressed. The kneading happens on a low table made from a single piece of olive wood, its surface worn into a gentle depression at the center where thousands of loaves have been shaped. We fold the dough over its, press with the heels of our palms, turn it a quarter rotation, and repeat, the motion becoming automatic, the rhythm as steady as breathing. The dough gradually changes texture under our hands from sticky and resistant to supple and cooperative, and we can feel the gluten strands forming, creating the structure that will hold air and rise. Flour dusts our forearms, turning our skin pale in the lantern light, and the scent of raw dough fills the alcove, yeasty and alive, promising sustenance without demanding anything in return. The work is neither hard nor easy, simply work that requires presence, and in that presence we find a kind of meditation that empties the mind of everything except the sensation of dough beneath our palms. Bread at the Caravanserai has always been flat and round, scored with patterns that allow it to break cleanly into portions, each person receiving enough without excess. The tradition comes from nomadic peoples who passed through these lands long before the Caravanserai was built, carrying their ovens with them, smaller versions of this one, baking on hot stones when no proper oven could be found. We have heard that the patterns scored into the bread were once symbols, each one representing a family or a clan, a way of marking your share when many groups gathered to eat together. Now the patterns are simply decoration, or perhaps, more accurately, they are habit preserved beyond the memory of its origin, beautiful for no reason other than they have always been beautiful. We finish kneading and gather the dough into a smooth ball, turning the seam underneath so the top is taut and unbroken. The dough goes into a large ceramic bowl, glazed on the inside with a pale green that reminds us of new leaves, and we cover the bowl with a clean cloth, linen woven loose enough to breathe but tight enough to keep insects away, and set it on a shelf in the coolest corner of the alcove where the night air can reach it through a narrow window. The dough will rest now, the yeast slowly multiplying, consuming the sugars in the flour and releasing bubbles of carbon dioxide that will make the dough rise by morning. This slow fermentation creates flavor as much as lift, transforming simple ingredients into something more complex. And the waiting is as essential as the mixing. We wash our hands in the basin near the oven, the water carrying away flour and leaving our skin feeling smooth and tight. Then dry them on the cloth that hangs beside the basin, which is damp already from earlier washings, but still does it. The brazier coals in the kitchen courtyard have dimmed to a deep red glow, barely visible, but still radiating gentle warmth that makes the space feel alive even as activity diminishes. The Caravanserai's original builders designed these spaces with an understanding of how heat moves through the day and night, positioning ovens and braziers to share warmth with sleeping quarters without making them stifling, allowing smoke to rise and disperse through vents cut into the roof at precise angles. The engineering is invisible to casual observation, just as the best designs often are, revealing themselves only through the comfort they create, the absence of discomfort being their signature. We notice how the air in the alcove is pleasantly warm, while the main hall where the mats are laid stays cool, how smoke from the incense never pools at ceiling level, but flows steadily toward openings we cannot see. These stones have absorbed and released heat for centuries, learning the rhythm of desert days where temperature swings from scorching to cold, and they moderate the extremes without effort, their thermal mass a gift from those who shaped them. We run our hands along the wall as we leave the alcove, feeling the smooth plaster still holding the day's warmth, giving it back slowly into the evening. In the courtyard, we check on the camels one last time before full darkness settles, making sure each has water and fodder, that none shows signs of discomfort that might disturb the night. The animals are remarkably peaceful, lying down already in their designated areas, their long legs folded beneath them, their heads swaying gently on those improbable necks as they chew their cud with profound contentment. Camels along the tea road are treated with respect bordering on reverence, as they should be, for without them the caravans could not function. Goods could not move across distances where neither horse nor ox can survive, and the network of trade that connects distant cities would collapse. These particular camels are veterans of the route, recognizable by the patterns of their fur and the way they navigate familiar spaces, knowing where the water troughs are, where the shade falls at midday, where the ground is softest for lying down. We check their hobble, loose enough for comfort, secure enough to prevent wandering. Though in truth, these animals rarely wander, content to stay where food and rest are guaranteed. The camel keeper, an old woman who has tended these animals for longer than we have been alive, sits on a low stool near the camel area, smoking a pipe filled with tobacco mixed with dried herbs that smell of mint and something earthier, like mushrooms, dried over fire. She nods as we approach, but says nothing, her attention on the animals, watching for signs of distress or illness that others might miss. She can identify each camel by the sound of its breathing, recognize a developing hoof problem by a shift in how the animal distributes its weight, predict weather changes by the way the herd behaves as evening approaches. This knowledge was passed to her by her mother, who learned it from her father, who learned it from the camel herders who came before, back through generations until the origin is lost in time, though the knowledge itself remains sharp and practical. We sit for a moment on the stone bench near her stool, listening to the camels breathe, their rhythm slow and deep, occasionally punctuated by a sigh or a soft groan that seems to express satisfaction more than complaint. The stars have fully emerged now, uncountable points of light scattered across the black dome above us, brighter here than in cities where lamplight obscures them, bright enough to cast faint shadows and to navigate by for those who know the pattern. The Milky Way arcs across the sky like a river of light, and we remember being told that the Milky Way is called the T-Road in the sky by some travelers, a celestial mirror of the earthly route we rest beside, both paths connecting distant places, both traveled by those seeking fin or home or simply the next. We watch the stars without trying to name them, content to let them be beautiful without categorization, and gradually our eyes adjust until we can see the fainter stars between the bright one, layer upon layer of light, reaching us from distances we cannot comprehend. A shooting star traces a quick line across the western quadrant, there and gone before we can point it out to anyone else. But the moment of seeing it feels like a small gift, unasked and therefore more precious. We return to the main hall where other travelers have begun to settle onto their mats, arranging their few belongings within reach, folding robes or blankets into additional pillows, removing boots and placing them neatly beside the mats so they can be found easily in the morning. The conversations that happened earlier over tea have faded now into quieter murmurs, voices barely above whisper level, respecting the transition into rest that everyone shares. Some travelers lie down immediately, their bodies clearly exhausted from days of walking or riding, their eyes closing almost before their heads touch the. Others sit cross-legged on their mats, engaged in private rituals of prayer or meditation, their lips moving silently, their hands forming gestures we recognize as sacred, though we do not know their precise meanings. The diversity of people who pass through the Caravanserai is part of its character. Merchants and pilgrims, scholars and craftspeople, families and solitary wanderers, each with their own reasons for traveling, their own destinations, but all sharing this space connected by the simple fact of needing rest. We find our own mats in the row near the eastern wall, where morning light will arrive gently rather than harsh, and we sit down, feeling the cushion of the mat beneath us, the support it offers to tired muscles, the way it seems to mold slightly to our shape, though it is too firm to actually do so. We remove our outer robes and fold them into rectangles, placing them at the foot of the mat, where they will serve as extra covering if the nose cold, which it often does in the hours before dawn. Our small traveling bag holds everything we own on this journey: a change of clothes, a small knife for cutting food, a leather pouch with a few coins, a notebook and pencil for recording observations, and a small carved stone given to us by someone whose name we have forgotten. We remember. We place the bag beside the mat where it can serve as a low table for the cup of water we will set there before lying down, a practice we learned from our mother, who believed that waking thirsty and finding water within reach, a small but important comfort. We retrieve our cup from the bag and walk to the fountain to fill it, the water cold and clean, tasting faintly of stone and earth and nothing else. Back on our mat with the cup of water placed carefully beside us, we begin the third ritual of the evening, the one that is most personal and least visible to others, the quieting of the mind through deliberate attention to breath and body. We sit comfortably, legs crossed loosely, spine straight but not rigid, hands resting on our knees with palms open to the cooling air. The position is one we have held many times, familiar enough that our body knows how to arrange itself without conscious thought. Yet we take a moment to adjust small things: the angle of our hips, the set of our shoulders, the placement of our chin, so that our neck is long and our throat open. We close our eyes, and the world behind our eyelids is not black, but a dark red-brown, lit from within by the lanterns around the hall, their light filtering through our lids like sunlight through closed curtains. We begin to notice our breathing without trying to change it, simply observing the natural rhythm that has sustained us throughout the day, the inhale that fills our lungs, pause at the top, the exhale that empties them, the pause at the bottom before the breath moves through us and we follow it with our attention the way one might watch waves approach and recede on a shore, neither pulling them closer nor pushing them away, just witnessing the inevitable rhythm. Our chest rises and falls, our belly expands and contracts, and gradually the breathing deepens on its own, finding a slower pace that matches the quietness of the hall around. We can hear other people breathing if we listen, a soft, collective susurration like wind through grass, and beneath that the occasional crackle of coals in the brazier, the distant call of a night bird somewhere beyond the walls, the almost imperceptible sound of fabric shifting as someone adjusts their position on their mat. These sounds do not disturb our focus. Instead, they become part of the meditation, proof that we are not alone, but also not required to engage, held in a space that asks nothing except that we rest. Our thoughts drift by like clouds, some substantial enough to catch our attention briefly, others so wispy they dissolve before we can name them, and we let them all pass without judgment or attachment. The practice of sitting quietly before sleep is not unique to this caravanserai, but is observed in various forms across the cultures that meet along the tea road, each tradition bringing its own methods and intentions, but all sharing the understanding that the transition from waking to sleeping deserves respect and attention. Some sit in meditation as we do, others recite prayers or mantras, some simply lie still and count breaths until sleep arrives, but the underlying wisdom is the same. The mind needs time to release its grip on the day before the body can fully rest. We have learned from travelers who passed through that in certain monasteries far to the east, monks spend hours each evening in seated meditation, training their minds to remain present even as fatigue pulls at them, finding in that practice a quality of rest that is deeper than ordinary sleep. Here at the Caravanserai, we do not aim for such heights, content with simpler goals, but we honor the principle that even a few minutes of intentional stillness can transform the night that follows. Our attention moves from breath to body, scanning slowly from the top of our head downward, noticing sensation without trying, simply is present. The crown of our head feels neutral, neither warm nor cool. Our forehead holds a slight tension we were not aware of until now, a tightness between our eyebrows, and we breathe into that space, imagining the breath carrying relaxation there, and the tension softens, though it does not completely disappear. Our eyes feel heavy behind closed lids, the muscles around them tired from squinting against sun and dust during the day's travel, and we let them rest more deeply into their socket, releasing any effort to see, even though there is nothing to. Our jaw, we discover, is clenched slightly, teeth touching when they could be separate, and we consciously relax the muscles, feeling our lower jaw drop a fraction, creating space between upper and lower teeth. The relief is immediate and surprising. A tension we had carried all day without noticing, suddenly released. We continue the scan down through our neck, feeling where it meets our shoulders, a place where stress often accumulates, building knots of tightness that can take days to unravel. Tonight, the tension is moderate, present, but not painful, and we imagine our breath flowing into our shoulders, expanding them slightly with each inhale, releasing them with each exhale, and gradually they drop away from our ears, settling into a more natural. Our arms feel long and heavy, good weight that connects us to the earth, and our hands lie relaxed on our knees, fingers neither curled nor extended, but somewhere between, effortless. Our chest rises and falls with each breath, and we notice how the movement is actually three-dimensional, expanding not just forward, but also to the sides and back, the ribs like a cage that breathes, creating space for our lungs to fill completely. Our belly is no longer held in by the unconscious vanity that us tighten our core during the day, and the softness allows for deeper breathing, the diaphragm descending fully on each inhale. The mat beneath us supports our sitting bones evenly, and we rock slightly from side to side to feel the balance point where our weight distributed perfectly, requiring minimal muscular effort to maintain our upright. Our legs are crossed comfortably, knees drop toward the floor though they do not reach it, supported by the thickness of our thighs and the cushion of the mat beneath them. Our feet rest against our inner thighs, soles upward, and we can feel the pulse in our feet if we pay attention. Blood flowing through arteries we never think about, keeping our extremities alive without any conscious direction from us. The body is a miracle of systems working in harmony, and in this moment of stillness we appreciate it, grateful for its service, for the way it carries us across distance, digests our food, heals our wounds, breathes without being reminded. We send a silent thank you into our body, a recognition of partnership rather than ownership, and the body seems to respond by settling more deeply into relaxation. Time becomes difficult to measure in this state. Minutes stretching or compressing depending on where our attention rests, and we do not try to track it, knowing that we will sit for as long as feels right, and then we will lie down, trusting our internal sense rather than any external clock. The lanterns around the hall have been dimmed slightly, someone making rounds with a small tool that lowers the wicks, reducing the light to a level that allows movement without tripping, but encourages rest rather than activity. The shadows on the walls grow longer and less defined, blending into each other until the corners of the hall disappear into dark. The temperature continues to drop as night deepens, the stone releasing the last of the day's heat, and the air takes on that particular quality of desert nights, cool and dry, easy to breathe, carrying no moisture to cling to skin or fabric. We can smell the incense still, fainter now, almost gone, and beneath it the smell of clean straw from the mats, the wool from the cushions, the faint lingering scent of tea. Someone across the hall begins to snore softly, a gentle rhythmic sound that is more soothing than disturbing, a reminder that we are surrounded by people who have already found their way into sleep, and their success encourages. We feel no pressure to rush toward sleep, knowing it will come when our body is ready, and until then, we are content to sit in this twilight state between waking and dreaming, aware but not alert, relaxed but not collapsed. Our thoughts have slowed considerably, appearing less frequently and with less urgency, like travelers on a road at dusk, fewer and fewer, as night claims the landscape. We notice a thought about tomorrow's journey, where we will walk, how far we hope to cover. But the thought has no emotional charge attached to it, just a neutral observation that passes through and continues on its way. Another thought about someone we left behind in the city we departed from 3 days ago, wondering how they are. But again, the thought is gentle, curious rather than concerned, and it too passes without leaving residue. We open our eyes slowly, letting them adjust to the dim light, and the hall comes back into focus, though it looks different than it did before we closed our eyes. Softer somehow, more dreamlike, as if the meditation has changed our rather than the hall itself. We stretch our arms overhead, feeling the length of our spine, then bring them down and place our palms on them, leaning back slightly to stretch the front of our, opening our chest after the forward curve of the stretch feels delicious, pulling at places that were beginning to stiffen, and we hold it for several breaths before releasing, coming back to neutral. We uncross our legs and extend them straight in front of us, flexing and pointing our feet to wake up our ankles and calves. Then we rotate our legs slowly, feeling the hip joints move through their range of motion. No pain, just the sensation of joints articulating the way they were designed to. These small movements prepare our body for lying down, transitioning from the structure of sitting to the surrender of horizontal rest. Finally, we shift our position, turning our body to align with the mat, lying down on our side first, then rolling onto our back, our head finding the small cushion, our arms resting at our sides, our legs extended and slightly apart, feet falling open naturally to the sides. The mat beneath us is firm but not hard, supporting our spine without creating pressure points, and the cushion under our head is exactly the right height, not lifting our chin too high or letting our head drop too low, but allowing our neck to remain neutral, the natural curve of our cervical spine maintained. We reach for the folded robe at our foot up over our body like a light blanket, not for warmth yet, but for the comfort of being covered, the psychological safety that comes from defining our personal space within the larger room. We take a sip from the cup of water beside our mat, the liquid cool and refreshing, washing away the last traces of tea and leaving our mouth feeling clean. We replace the cup carefully, making sure it is stable and will not spill if bumped during the night. We lie still, feeling our bodies settle into the mat, the initial contact points where weight meets surface, gradually spreading as muscles release their holding patterns and allow gravity to do its work. Our heels sink slightly, our calves make contact, the backs of our thighs find the mat, our hips settle, our shoulder blades spread, and the back of our head presses gently into the cushion. Each point of contact is a small anchor, connecting us to the earth through layers of woven rushes and stone, and we become aware of being supported completely, held up not by our own effort, but by the structure beneath us. The sensation is one of letting go, surrendering the vigilance that keeps us upright during waking hours, trusting that we will not fall, because there is nowhere to fall to. We have already arrived at the lowest point. Our breathing continues its steady rhythm, perhaps slightly faster than it was during sitting meditation, but still slow and even. No gasps or catches, just the reliable tide of air moving in and out. The sounds of the hall have changed as more people have settled into sleep, the rustling and shifting giving way to breathing, and the occasional soft snore, a symphony of rest, played in the key of human vulnerability. We can hear the collective breath of perhaps 30 people, though we have not counted, each person's rhythm slightly different, creating a complex pattern that is somehow soothing rather than chaotic, like listening to rain fall on many different surfaces at once. Someone near the western wall sighs deeply in their sleep, a sound of release that seems to express what we all feel, the relief of horizontal rest after vertical effort. A child somewhere in the hall makes a small sound, not quite a cry, but a questioning murmur, and we hear a parent's soft voice responding, too quiet to make out words, but the tone unmistakable, comfort offered and presumably received because the child made no further sound. These are the sounds of safety, of a community at rest, and they work on us like a lullaby works on children, bypassing the conscious mind and speaking directly to the nervous system. The caravanserais along the T road were built not just as shelters, but as guarantees of peace, neutral territory, where conflicts from outside could not follow, where merchant and nomad, rich and poor, could rest beside each other without. The tradition holds that weapons must be left with the keeper at the gate, that disputes must be settled before entering or postponed until after leaving, that the space itself is sacred in the sense that it belongs to no one and therefore to everyone. We have heard of caravanserais that stood for centuries without walls, protected only by this understanding, and though bandits roamed the routes between them, they never attacked the caravans themselves, recognizing that to do so would destroy a resource they themselves might need someday. This particular building has walls, thick ones made to withstand sandstorms and the occasional raid that ignored custom. But even so, the sense of sanctuary comes less from stone than from shared agreement, the invisible contract that all travelers sign when they cross the threshold. Our eyes have been closed since we lay down, but behind our lids we sense the continuing presence of light, the lanterns that remain lit through the night at reduced brightness, enough to guide someone who wakes needing to use the facilities or get water, not enough to prevent sleep for those sensitive to light. The quality of this light is warm and amber, nothing like the blue-white harshness of electric bulbs we have known in cities, and our eyes register it as firelight, which our ancestors knew for hundreds of thousands of years before any other kind of illumination existed. There is something in our nervous system that recognizes this light as safe, as the light of the hearth and the campfire, the light that kept predators at bay and created a circle of human warmth in the darkness. Even with our eyes closed, our body relaxes more deeply in the presence of this ancient light, old recognition stirring in new bones. We notice our mind beginning to drift, thoughts becoming less linear and more associative, one image leading to another, not through logic, but through dreamlike connection. We see the tea leaves unfurling in hot water, then we see the rushes growing, then we are at the river ourselves, though we have never visited the place where these rushes grow. In this twilight, we can imagine it clearly. Water flowing over smooth stones, banks lined with green growth, dragonfly hovering in the warm. The image shifts without transition, and we are walking along the T road, though we cannot tell if we are remembering the walk we actually took today, or inventing one that exists only in imagination, and the distinction does not seem important. Both walks feeling equally real in this moment. The road stretches ahead of us endlessly, neither welcoming nor forbidding, simply existing as roads do, offering passage to those who choose to walk them. Another shift, and we are in a different caravanserai, or perhaps the same one at a different time. The details slightly changed, the courtyard smaller or larger, the fountain in a different position, but the essential quality the same. That sense of temporary home, of shelter, earned through the effort of. We see travelers we have known, faces we recognize, though we cannot remember their names, and they nod to us as acknowledgment between fellow wanderers who share the understanding that movement itself is a kind of belonging. The visions continue to flow, growing more abstract, less tied to specific places or people, becoming pure sensation instead. The feeling of warmth spreading through limbs, the sensation of floating while simultaneously being held, the curious paradox of ascending and descending at once. We are aware that we are falling asleep, consciousness beginning its nightly dissolution, but the awareness is distant and non-intrusive, like watching ourselves from outside ourselves. The temperature in the hall has dropped further, cool enough now that the light covering we pulled over ourselves is welcome, not quite necessary, but pleasant, and we adjust it slightly, bringing it higher on our chest, tucking it around our shoulders. The wool cushion beneath our head has compressed slightly under our weight, molding to the shape of our skull, and we shift fractionally to find the most comfortable position. Our head turns slightly to the right, our left cheek now against the cushion, and this small change brings a wave of comfort that seems disproportionate to the action that caused it. Our left arm lies along our body, our hand resting on our hip, and our right arm extends slightly to the side, palm down on the mat, fingers relaxed and curled naturally. Our legs are straight but not rigid, knees very slightly bent, and our feet have fallen outward, toes pointing toward the edges of the mat, the position of complete muscular relaxation that the body assumes when trust is complete. The incense has burned out entirely, its smoke dispersed hours ago, but the scent lingers in a way that is more memory than actual smell, a ghost of fragrance that appears when we direct our attention toward it and disappears when we focus elsewhere. The air we breathe is clean and dry, carrying no dust now that all movement has ceased, no pollen, because the desert around us supports little flowering vegetation, just the pure thin air of altitude and aridity, and it fills our lungs with ease, asking nothing of our respiratory system, making breathing an effortless gift rather than a task that requires attention. Our body temperature has stabilized, warm enough beneath our light covering but not overheated. The perfect balance that allows sleep to come without the distraction of discomfort, and we feel our metabolism slowing as it does each night, preparing for the reduced demands of rest, conserving energy for tomorrow's needs. The sound of the fountain in the courtyard reaches us faintly through the archway, a continuous liquid murmur that has not changed since we first arrived, will not change until we leave, a constant beneath all variables, and its constancy is itself a form of comfort, proof that some things continue regardless of our attention to them. Water in the desert is never taken for granted, never wasted, never treated as common, and the fact that this fountain runs continuously, fed by its underground spring, makes it precious beyond its practical utility. Travelers have been known to linger an extra day at this caravanserai just to sit beside the fountain, to listen to water moving, to remember that the world holds abundance even in the midst of scarcity, that generosity exists even where survival seems to demand hoarding. We think of the fountain without opening our eyes, seeing it in memory or imagination, the way water catches lantern light as it falls, creating liquid ribbons of amber, and the image carries us deeper into the hypnagogic state where waking and sleeping blur into each. A final thought surfaces. something about tomorrow, about continuing the journey, about the distances still to cover. But the thought has no urgency attached to it, no anxiety or anticipation, just a neutral acknowledgement that tomorrow exists and will arrive whether we think about it or not. And we release the thought the way we have released all the others tonight, letting it drift away like smoke, leaving behind only the present moment, which is all we need to navigate this drowsy state. Our breathing has slowed further still, barely noticeable now even to ourselves, the slight rise and fall of our chest under the covering, and the pauses between breaths grow longer, though never so long as to trigger the reflex that jerks us back to consciousness. We are surrendering by increments, giving up wakefulness one small letting go at a time, and the process is so gradual that we cannot point to the moment when sleep finally claims us completely, the transition seamless as day becoming night, as inevitable and as natural. Sleep wraps around like silk, so gradual in its arrival that we cannot distinguish the border between conscious rest and unconscious dreaming, and for a time we exist in both states simultaneously, aware of the hall around us and also aware of a dream landscape that unfolds with perfect clarity, more vivid than waking memory. In this dream, we are walking again, but not on the tea road we know, instead on a path made of compressed tea leaves, dark and fragrant beneath our feet, winding through mountains we have never seen but recognize somehow as true mountains, not invented, but remembered from some life we have not lived. The air in the dream is cool and thin, exactly like the air in the hall where our body lies, and this correspondence between sleeping and waking keeps us tethered to both worlds, prevents us from diving too deeply into dream, holds us suspended in that productive sleep. Body rests, but the mind continues its subtle processing of the day's experiences. The dream path leads us to a structure that resembles the Caravanserai. It's formed, its walls transparent as water, its courtyard filled with mist that glows from within, and we enter without hesitation, knowing we are safe here, that this is another version of sanctuary, one that exists only in sleep, but is no less real. For inside, travelers sit in circles, not speaking, but communicating nonetheless, thoughts passing between them like visible light. And we understand without being told that this is the place where all caravanserais connect, a meeting point that exists beneath ordinary reality, accessible only to those who sleep within these walls. We join one of the circles and feel immediately the warmth of connection, the recognition that we are part of something larger than our individual journey, woven into a pattern that has been repeating for centuries, each traveler adding their thread to the ongoing design. The feeling is one of belonging without possession, participation without obligation, and it fills us with a peace that will linger even after we wake. The dream shifts as dreams do, and now we are in the kitchen courtyard watching the tea master, but he moves at impossible speed, his hands blurring as he prepares pot after pot of tea, pouring for people who appear and disappear like smoke, each one receiving exactly what they need, though no words are exchanged. The copper kettle on the brazier never empties, steam rising from it in a continuous column that reaches toward the stars, and we understand that this is how the world works in this deeper reality, resources never depleting because they are renewed by the act of sharing, the paradox of generosity that gives and receives simultaneously. The tea tastes different in the dream, sweeter and more complex, carrying flavors we have no names for, and each sip seems to answer questions we did not know we had, dissolving confusion without replacing it with certainty, simply making the confusion irrelevant. Tea masters at the Caravanserais often begin their training as children, learning first to identify leaves by scent alone, then by taste, graduating to the subtle art of water temperature and steeping time only after years of basic practice. The position is one of quiet authority, for the tea master controls the rhythm of evening gatherings, determines when conversation flows and when silence settles, reads the mood of travelers, and adjusts accordingly. We have heard that some tea masters develop an almost supernatural sensitivity, able to diagnose illness by watching how someone holds their cup, predict conflicts before they arise by observing who sits near whom, sense approaching by changes in how tea leaves. Whether these abilities are real or legendary hardly matters, for the respect given to tea masters is real regardless. Recognition that their work, though it appears simple, holds the community together in ways both visible and invisible. The dream releases us gently, and we float upward through layers of consciousness, not quite waking, but surfacing enough to become aware again of our body, on the weight, the covering over us, the sounds, the hall around us. We hear someone walking softly across the hall, their footsteps careful and deliberate, trying not to wake anyone, and we track their progress without opening our eyes, sensing them move toward the courtyard, probably seeking the facilities or needing water, or simply unable to sleep and wanting to sit beneath the stars. Their footsteps fade, and we are alone again with the collective breathing, which has deepened as more people have fallen into true sleep. The rhythm slower and more profound, less individual variation and more unanimity, as if we are all beginning to breathe as one organism. The thought is comforting rather than unsettling, this temporary dissolution of boundaries, and we allow ourselves to merge with the collective breath, our inhale synchronized with countless others, our exhale joining theirs. Time continues its strange behavior during sleep, expanding and contracting without logic, so that what feels like hours might be minutes, or what feels like moments might span half the night. And we have no way of knowing except by checking the lanterns, noting how far the wicks have burned down, or looking through the high windows to see if the stars have shifted position. We do neither of these things, content to exist in timeless time, the eternal present that sleep offers, where yesterday and tomorrow collapse into now and nothing else exists except the sensation of rest, of being held and safe and still. Our body has stopped making small adjustments, finding finally the perfect position that requires no modification, and this stillness becomes another form of surrender, the physical manifestation of trust. We trust the mat to support us, the hall to shelter us, the night to pass without threat, the morning to arrive on schedule, and in that network of trust, we can finally let go completely. The cool air moves slowly through the hall, not a breeze exactly, but a gradual circulation, warmer air rising toward the ceiling and cooler air settling near the floor, creating a gentle convection that keeps the atmosphere fresh without creating drafts that might disturb sleep. The architects who designed these spaces understood wind patterns, knew how to create openings that would capture prevailing breezes and channel them through sleeping areas, how to position walls to block storms while allowing gentle air movement during calm nights. They learned these principles not from books, but from observations, spending nights in temporary shelters, noting what worked and what failed, refining their understanding across generations until they could build structures that breathed like living things, inhaling cool night air, exhaling the accumulated warmth of bodies and braziers. We benefit from their knowledge without thinking about it, the way we benefit from countless innovations that have become so integrated into daily life that they are invisible, noticed only in their absence. Somewhere deep in sleep, a dream continues without our conscious awareness, processing the day's experiences, filing memories into their proper categories, discarding what is unnecessary, strengthening what is important, performing the essential maintenance that keeps our minds functioning. We will not remember this dream. It works below the level where memory forms, but it does its work regardless, and we will wake slightly different than we were. Perspectives shifted by fractions of degrees, priorities adjusted by increments too small to measure but real nonetheless. This is what sleep offers beyond rest, this subtle reorganization that happens when the conscious mind steps aside and allows deeper processes to proceed uninterrupted. The body, too, is doing its work, repairing the micro tears in muscle fibers that walking created, clearing metabolic waste from tissues, balancing hormones, strengthening immune responses, all the invisible labor that transforms rest into restoration. The night deepens toward its darkest hour, the point halfway between sunset and sunrise, when even those who fight sleep usually surrender, when the world is at its quietest and most still. The lanterns have burned down further, their light dimmer now, barely adequate for navigation, but sufficient for their purpose, which is comfort rather than illumination. The shadows have grown so deep that objects lose definition, the room becoming a space of suggested forms rather than clear shapes. And in this darkness, we feel safer, less exposed, wrapped in night's privacy. Our breathing has found its deepest rhythm, perhaps 8 or 10 breaths per minute, compared to the 15 or 20 we take while awake, and this slower breathing signals to our entire system that it is safe to conserve energy, to turn down the metabolic furnace, to rest in earnest. Our heart rate has slowed correspondingly, steady and strong but unhurried, and if we could feel our pulse now, it would be like distant drum beats, marking time in a way that suggests time itself has slowed. The covering over us has warmed from our body heat, creating a microclimate between fabric and skin, and this warmth is one of the simple pleasures of being human, the ability to create shelter within shelter, to make ourselves comfortable through small acts of arrangement. We have arranged our body on the mat, arranged the covering over our body, arranged our mind into rest, and these arrangements, though modest, constitute a kind of art, the art of living well in temporary circumstances, of finding home wherever we pause long enough to rest. The Caravanserai teaches this art to everyone who passes through, not through instruction, but through example, showing that home is not a permanent structure, but a set of practices, rituals of care that we can carry with us and deploy wherever we find ourselves. We are home now, on this mat in this hall, as much home as we would be anywhere, because we have performed the rituals that create home, and the building holds space for our belonging. The night continues its silent path, hours marked only by the gradual shift of stars across the windows, constellations wheeling slowly in their eternal dance, and we drift between layers of sometimes deeper, sometimes shallow enough to register sounds or sensations before sinking again. In one of these shallow moments, we become aware of the camel keeper making her rounds, her footsteps recognizable by their particular rhythm, slightly uneven, the left foot landing heavier than the right, and we hear her pause at the entrance to the hall, checking that all is well, that no one needs assistance before continuing to the courtyard where her animals rest. Her vigilance is part of what makes sleep possible here, knowing that someone watches while we surrender consciousness, that the community's safety is held by those who choose to remain awake. We sink back into deeper sleep, reassured by her presence, and the dream that was waiting resumes where it left off. In this dream, we are sitting beside the fountain, though whether it is memory or invention we cannot tell, listening to water fall from the upper basin to the lower, a sound so continuous it becomes silence, the way ocean waves eventually disappear into background for those who live by the sea. The courtyard is filled with soft blue light, not moonlight exactly, something gentler, as if the stones themselves are luminous, and in this light we see patterns in the tiles around the fountain that were invisible during the day, geometric designs that seem to move when we do not look directly at them, spirals leading into spirals, infinities nested within infinities. We understand without words that these patterns are maps of not showing physical territory, but charting pathways through consciousness. And if we could read them properly, we would understand something essential about the nature of journeys, about how all roads lead both outward and inward. The fountain in the waking world continues its patient work, moving water from deep underground to surface, offering it freely to all who need it, then allowing it to drain away through channels that return it to the aquifer, completing a cycle that wastes nothing. This careful water management is what makes life possible in desert regions, the understanding that water must be shared and recycled, never claimed as private property, always flowing through rather than accumulating in one place. The earliest settlements along the Tea Road grew up around springs like reliable water sources that determined where caravanserais could be built, where routes could pass, where rest was possible. Without these springs, the road itself, trade would follow different paths entirely, and the cultural exchange that defines the Tea Road would never have happened. We owe our presence here, our ability to rest, to water moving underground, to geology that created fissures allowing aquifers to form, to rain falling on distant mountains years or decades ago. The dream shifts, and we are kneading bread again, but the dough beneath our somehow alive, breathing in rhythm with us, rising and falling with each push and fold, and we realize we are not making bread, participating in bread making itself, as if the process exists independently, and we are merely vehicles through which it manifests. The sensation is pleasant, meditative, and we continue the motion without thought, hands moving in patterns they know, and gradually the dough transforms into something else, something that looks like dough but smells like tea. And we understand this is dream logic, making connections that waking mind would reject as impossible, but sleeping mind accepts as true, because in dreams, tea and bread are the same, both substances that comfort and sustain, both requiring patience and attention, both gifts that communities share. The dream does not explain this understanding, does not need to. We simply know it the way we know things in dreams, with certainty that requires no proof. We surface again briefly, aware of our body shifting slightly on the mat, our right hip asking for relief from pressure, and we roll partially onto our left side, drawing our right knee up, the classic recovery position that takes weight off the spine and allows the body to curve naturally. The movement is automatic, performed half asleep, and we settle immediately into the new position, pulling the covering with us, tucking it around our shoulder, and within moments we have forgotten we moved. The discomfort that prompted it already gone, replaced by the comfort of proper alignment. Our left arm extends under the cushion now, our hand emerging on the other side, and our right arm drapes over our body, hand resting near our face, close enough that we can smell our own skin. A scent is deeply familiar and therefore comforting, the smell of self, of home, carried within. Our breathing remains steady and slow, undisturbed by the position change, and we descend again into deeper waters. The collective breathing in the hall has become a kind of music, each person an instrument playing their unique variation on the theme of rest, and together they create a composition that is never quite the same twice, improvised fresh each night by whatever combination of travelers happens to be present. Some snore in steady rhythm, others breathe so quietly they seem almost. Children make small sounds in their sleep, dreaming whatever children dream, and the overall effect is a symphony of vulnerability. Humanity stripped of pretense and defenses, reduced to its essential biological functions. We are all just bodies here, breathing and dreaming, regardless of what wealth or status or accomplishments we carry during waking hours. And this equality is profound, a reminder that underneath our stories about who we are all the same creature, requiring the same basic needs, seeking the same fundamental comforts. The Caravanserai enforces this equality simply by providing sleeping mats instead of private rooms, by placing everyone in the same hall regardless of their ability to pay. The practice of communal sleeping has ancient roots, going back to times when humans lived in small groups and slept together for warmth and protection. And though modern life has moved toward privacy and individual spaces, something in us still recognizes the comfort of sleeping near others, the primal safety of. Studies have shown that people often sleep better when they can hear others breathing nearby, the nervous system interpreting these sounds as proof of safety, evidence that the group is relaxed and therefore no threats are present. The Caravanserai preserves this ancient wisdom, not out of inability to provide private rooms, but from understanding that some things are lost when we isolate ourselves too completely, that the presence of others sleeping peacefully can help us find our own peace. We sleep better here than we would alone in a locked room, the paradox of privacy being that too much of it can feel like abandonment, while the right amount of company creates security without intrusion. The night air grows colder still, approaching the temperature that will hold until just before dawn, will drop a few degrees further before the sun arrives to warm it again. Our body has adapted, generating slightly more heat, and the covering over us now feels essential rather than optional, and we are grateful for it. Grateful for whoever wove the fabric, grateful for the sheep that grew the wool, grateful for the simple technology of textile production that allows us to create warmth from plant and animal fiber. These gratitudes arise unbidden, not as conscious thoughts, but as feelings, deep appreciation for the web of labor and care and knowledge that makes our comfort possible. And in our half-sleeping state, these feelings seem more real than they do during waking hours when we take such things for granted. We pull the covering slightly higher, tucking it under our chin, and the additional warmth around our neck and throat brings another small wave of contentment. A dream rises, or perhaps the distinction unclear, and we are walking through rooms we have never seen, each one containing a different version of comfort. One room holds a fire burning in a hearth, another a pool of warm water, another hanging fabrics and jewel color, move in a breeze we cannot feel, and we understand we are touring the architecture of rest itself, seeing all the ways humans have tried to create sanctuary throughout history. Each room teaches us something, not through words, but through the feeling it evokes. And we collect these teachings like stones in our pockets, knowing we will not remember them specifically when we wake, but trusting they will influence us nonetheless, will make us slightly wiser about what rest requires, what comfort needs, what peace demands. The rooms go on endlessly, a labyrinth of shelter, and we walk through them without fatigue or impatience, knowing there is no need to finish, no goal except the walking itself, the continuous discovery of new forms of refuge. The dream fades, and we are simply asleep, deeply and dreamlessly, the kind of sleep where time accelerates and hours pass as if they were minutes, the body doing its deepest work of restoration, the mind completely offline, consciousness reduced to its barest minimum, just enough to keep breathing and maintain basic functions, but nothing more. This is the sleep that matters most, the delta wave sleep where healing happens, where the day's damage is repaired, where energy is restored for tomorrow's demands, and we surrender to it completely. No resistance, no holding back, trusting the process that has kept our species alive for hundreds of thousands of years. The Caravanserai holds us in its stone embrace. The mat supports us. The covering warms us. The air nourishes us. And we rest as our ancestors rested, as travelers have always rested, as humans will rest as long as they need shelter, as long as roads lead somewhere worth going, as long as night requires surrender. The deep hours of night pass in a stillness so complete it feels like the world itself has paused, holding its breath between yesterday and tomorrow, and we rest in that pause without awareness of its passing, our consciousness reduced to the faintest flicker, barely present, but enough to our body functioning, to process the subtle signals that tell us we are safe and remain in this vulnerable state. The stars wheel overhead, completing their slow rotation, patterns our ancestors knew intimately, navigated by, told stories about, and we participate in that ancient relationship without knowing it. Our sleeping bodies, synchronized to celestial rhythms that predate cities and roads and all the structures we think of as permanent. The moon has long since, leaving only starlight and the dim glow of lanterns whose wicks have burned so low they barely qualify as light anymore, just the faintest of flame, enough to keep total darkness at bay, but not enough to read by or navigate with confidence. In this darkest stretch before dawn, when sleep is deepest and dreams are strangest, we descend into waters we will not remember visiting, where the boundaries of self become porous and we merge temporarily with something larger, call it the collective unconscious, or simply the shared human experience of rest, that place where all sleepers meet, regardless of time. Here we encounter not specific people or places, but archetype patterns that repeat across cultures, the traveler, the home, the road, the rest, the journey that continues, and we understand without words that we are not unique in our seeking, that countless others have walked where we walk, slept where we sleep, wondered what we wonder, and this recognition of shared experience brings a comfort that will linger after waking, even though we will not remember its soul. The dream realm at this hour is less about story and more about distilled truths that bypass language and logic and speak directly to the parts of us that existed before we learned to talk. The temperature in the hall has reached its lowest point, cold enough now that our breath would be visible if we opened our eyes, but we remain cocooned in sleep and beneath our covering, the warmth we generate trapped in the space between back and skin, creating a microclimate that feels like summer while the room holds winter's chill. Our body has adjusted its metabolism automatically, increasing heat production just enough to maintain core temperature without waking us to shiver or seek additional covering. The autonomic nervous system managing these calculations without consulting consciousness. And we benefit from this invisible labor the way we benefit from our heartbeat, our digestion, all the systems that work tirelessly to keep us up. The mat beneath us has absorbed some of our body heat, becoming slightly warmer than the stone floor it rests on. And this warmth rises back into us, a small recycling of energy that helps maintain our comfort. The rushes used for making sleeping mats are harvested during late summer when they have reached full height, but before they begin to dry naturally, cut at the base with sharp knives by workers who wade into shallow water, sometimes singing work songs whose rhythms match the cutting motion. The rushes are then spread on flat ground to dry evenly, turned daily for a week or more until all moisture is gone, and they take on that pale gold color, brittle if bent too sharply, but flexible if handled correctly. Weaving happens during winter months when field work is minimal, families gathering in workshops to plait the dried rushes into mats of standard sizes, the work repetitive but never tedious because hands can work while minds wander or while conversations flow, and the mats produced this way carry in their structure the attention and care of their makers, becoming more than simple objects, becoming vessels of human effort and skill. We lie so still we might appear lifeless to an observer, but inside us, activity continues at cellular level, millions of processes occurring simultaneously, energy being produced and consumed, waste being filtered and expelled, information being stored and consolidated, our body a city that never sleeps even when we do. And this city maintains itself through the night, preparing for the morning when we will ask it to move again, to carry us forward, to continue the journey. Our muscles relax completely in deep sleep, tension draining away like water, and this relaxation allows blood to flow more freely, delivering oxygen and nutrients to tissues compressed or restricted during waking hours when we held ourselves upright against gravity. Our spine lengthens slightly as discs between vertebrae absorb fluid and expand, and we grow taller in our sleep by small fractions of an inch that we will lose again once we stand, and gravity reasserts its compressive force. The dream that was waiting surfaces again, patient as dreams are, infinite in their willingness to wait for the right moment, and we find ourselves once more at a threshold, this time between the courtyard and the sleeping hall, neither inside nor outside, but in the liminal space that belongs to both and neither. The archway frames the stars above and the fountain below, and we stand in this frame, understanding that all of life consists of such thresholds, moments of transition between states, and that the crossings themselves matter as much as the destination. Someone passes through the archway, walking from courtyard to hall, and though we see only their silhouette, we recognize them as a version of ourselves, the self that travels while the self that stays watches, and we understand that both are necessary, both are real. Both are aspects of the same being moving through different dimensions. The figure nods to us and continues, disappearing to the dimness of the hall. The hours between midnight and dawn are traditionally considered the most spiritually active, when the veil between worlds is thinnest, when prayers are most likely to be heard, when insight arrive unbidden, and though we are too deeply asleep to be consciously aware of this threshold time, our unconscious knows it and does its work accordingly, processing not just the material of daily life, but the deeper questions that we carry without acknowledging, the fears and hopes and uncertainties that drive us forward even when we cannot name them. In this processing, some burdens are lightened, some knots are loosened, some paths become clearer, and we will wake slightly changed, slightly more prepared for what comes next, though we will not know what work was done or how it was. This is the gift of deep sleep, the transformation that happens in darkness and silence, the alchemy that turns exhaustion into renewal. The camel keeper makes another round, her footsteps familiar now, woven into the fabric of the night sounds, and we register her at some level too deep for conscious thought, but not too deep for the nervous system to note and approve, adding her vigilance to the collection of signals that confirm our safety. She pauses, as she always does, at the entrance to the hall, listening for any sign of distress, any call for help, hearing only the symphony of peaceful breathing, and satisfied, she continues to her station by the camels, where she will sit through the remainder of the night, dozing lightly in a way that allows her to wake instantly if needed, her rest calibrated differently than ours, because her role demands it. We are grateful for her in ways we cannot articulate, grateful for everyone who chooses to watch while others sleep, who take responsibility for collective safety, who understand that community requires this division of labor, some resting while others guard, the roles rotating so that everyone gets their turn at both. The lanterns have almost exhausted their oil, flames reduced to tiny points that dance weakly, throwing no real light but refusing to extinguish completely. Stubborn, small fires that will last until dawn arrives to make them unnecessary. Someone will need to refill and trim them later, clean the soot from the glass, replace any wicks that have burned too short, maintenance work that happens every day, invisible to most but essential to the functioning of this place, and we appreciate suddenly all the invisible work that makes any shelter possible, all the tasks performed without recognition or praise, the sweeping and washing and mending and tending that keeps disorder at bay and allows comfort to exist. Our appreciation is wordless and brief, passing feeling in the midst of sleep, but it is real, and perhaps in some small way it adds to the atmosphere of the Caravanserai, becomes part of the invisible web of goodwill that makes this space feel different from ordinary building. The night begins its slow turn toward morning, though dawn is still hours away, the change too subtle to measure but present nonetheless, some quality in the darkness that suggests that light is coming, though not yet visible, and our body senses this shift at unconscious levels, beginning the gradual process of preparing to wake even while we remain deep, hormones adjusting, temperature rising fractionally, brain waves slowly increasing in frequency. We will not wake suddenly or harshly, but will emerge gradually from sleep's depths the way a diver rises slowly through water, allowing pressure to equalize at each level, avoiding the shock that comes from too rapid an ascent. For now, we remain submerged, suspended in the timeless, unaware of our body's subtle preparation, focused only on the dream that unfolds, the internal landscape that feels more real in this moment than any waking reality. The dream landscape shifts again, becoming less defined, more atmospheric, and we find ourselves in a space that is all texture, sensation, rather than visual form, a place made of feelings rather than object, where comfort itself is the architecture and warmth is the floor we walk. We move through this space without feet, perceive it without eyes, understanding it through some sense that has no name in waking language, and what we understand is that rest is not absence, but presence, not emptiness, but fullness of a different kind, the mind filled with peace instead of thought, the body filled with ease instead of tension. This revelation, if it can be called that, settles into us like sediment sinking through water, and though we will not remember it consciously, it will change something subtle in how we approach sleep from this night forward, making us slightly more trusting of the process, slightly more willing to surrender. The hall around our sleeping body continues its patient vigil, stone walls holding their position as they have for centuries, absorbing and releasing heat in slow cycles that smooth out temperature extremes, creating the moderation that makes sleep possible even when outside conditions would prevent it. These walls have witnessed countless sleepers, absorbed countless dreams, held space for innumerable nights of rest, and they carry that history in their stones, in the slight polish that generations of shoulders leaning against them has created, in the wear patterns on the floor where feet have walked the same paths day after day, year after year. If stones could speak, they would tell stories of merchants who slept here on their way to fortune or ruin, of pilgrims seeking distant shrines, of families fleeing conflict or famine, of lovers traveling to weddings, of scholars carrying manuscript, of musicians with their instrument, all the human variety that flows along the tea road, all finding common ground in the simple need for shelter and rest. The bread dough we prepared hours ago has been rising slowly in its covered bowl, yeast working steadily through the flour, creating bubbles that expand the dough, transforming dense mass into light sponge, and by morning it will have doubled and ready to be shaped and baked, the fermentation creating complex flavors that simple mixing cannot produce. This process happens in darkness and silence, requiring no attention or intervention, just time and the right conditions, and it mirrors what happens in our own bodies during sleep. The slow transformation that occurs when we step back and allow natural processes to proceed without interference. The dough rising and the body resting are both acts of faith, trusting that the systems know what to do, that the outcome will be good if we simply provide the conditions and get out of the way. Morning will bring fresh bread and fresh energy, both produced by the same principle of patient allowing. The ceramic bowl holding the dough is glazed in that particular shade of pale green that appears throughout the Caravanserai, in tiles and pottery and painted a color made from copper oxide mixed into the glaze before firing, a technique brought along the tea road from distant kilns, where the chemistry of glazes was perfected over generations. The green is cool and calming, reminiscent of new growth in spring, of water-rough sky, of jade and other precious stones, and its prevalence in this space is not accidental, but a conscious choice by builders and decorators who understood that colors affect mood, that surrounding people with soothing tones helps them relax, that beauty serves function by making spaces more habitable. We are influenced by these colors even in sleep, even with eyes closed, the visual memory of them lingering in our minds, contributing to the overall sense of harmony that makes this place feel safe. Our breathing has found its absolute slowest rhythm now, perhaps 6 breaths per minute, each one deep and full, drawing air all the way into the bases of our lungs, where the richest exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs, and our blood is well oxygenated despite the slow rate. Our body efficient in its gas exchange, requiring less movement to achieve the same result, because rest has optimized every system. Our heart beats perhaps 50 times per minute, strong and steady, pumping blood through miles of vessels without strain or effort, and if we could feel it, we would recognize the rhythm as entirely peaceful. No urgency or stress, just reliable. The drumbeat that has accompanied us since before birth and will continue till our last moment. These autonomic rhythms are the foundation of our existence, operating beyond consciousness control, simply being what they are, faithful and enduring. The stars outside continue their wheeling dance, familiar constellations rotating around the celestial pole, and somewhere in the hall, someone who has woken briefly to use the facilities pauses on their return to look up through the high windows, seeing patterns their culture has named differently than ours, but recognizing the same essential shapes, the same relationships between points of light. Stars have guided travelers along the T-road for as long as the road has existed, providing navigation when landmarks were invisible in darkness, marking the passage of seasons through their shifting positions, offering a kind of companionship to those who traveled at night, proof that even in vast darkness there are reliable reference patterns that repeat, order that persists. The person looking at stars now feels connected to all the other stargazers throughout history, a momentary bridge across time, and then they return to their mat and sleep reclaims them. The fountain in the courtyard maintains its constant murmur, water falling from upper basin to lower, in an endless cycle that seems to exist outside time. And if we could measure the amount of water it moves in a night, in a year, in a century, the numbers would be staggering. But the fountain does not count or measure. It simply performs its function without complaint or fatigue. The way our hearts pump blood, the way our lungs breathe air, essential work done without expectation of recognition. The sound of falling water has been proven to help people sleep, the white noise quality masking other sounds that might wake us, the regularity providing a kind of auditory anchor that the brain can relax around, and the fountain serves this purpose, whether intentionally designed to do so or not, its presence making the hall quieter in the paradoxical way that consistent sound can create silence around itself. We dream of water now, or perhaps the sound of the fountain has woven itself. Every dream was already in progress, and we are swimming in a river that is both water and life, flowing downstream toward an ocean we cannot see but know is then the current carries us effortless. No need to swim or paddle, just surrender to the flow and trust that we will arrive where we need. Other swimmers appear beside us, keeping pace, and though we do not speak, we communicate through some form of understanding that bypasses language, sharing the experience of being carried, of moving without effort, of participating in something larger than ourselves. The river widens and slows, becoming so broad we cannot see the shores, becoming the ocean itself, and we float on our backs, looking up at a sky that holds all the stars we have ever seen and others we have never imagined, and we understand that this is where sleep takes us when we let it, into the ocean of consciousness that connects all beings, all time, all places. The dream releases us again, and we surface slightly, not quite waking, but rising to a level where we are aware of our body and the room and the passage of time, aware that the night progressed substantially. That morning is no longer impossibly distant, but approaching at its inevitable pace, and this awareness brings a small sadness, the reluctance to leave sleep's embrace, but also a small anticipation, the recognition that rest is good, but movement is also good, that lying still has its time, and so does rising to meet the day. We are not yet ready to wake. Several hours of sleep still needed, still deserved, and we sink back into deeper waters, pulling the covering more snugly around us, adjusting our position infinitesimally, finding perfect comfort one more time before the final stretch of night carries us toward dawn. The mat beneath us has become part of us, or we have become part of it, the boundary between our body and its support dissolving in the way that happens during deep rest. The hall holds us all, 30 or more bodies arranged in rows, breathing in their individual rhythms that somehow harmonize, dreaming their separate dreams that somehow connect. And in this collection of solitude, we find community. The paradox, being alone together can feel safer, being truly isolated. The Caravanserai was designed for this, understood that travelers need both privacy and company, need to be separate individuals and also part of a temporary collective, and it provides both by giving everyone their own mat in a shared space. Boundaries are respected but permeable. Solitude, we rest better knowing others rest nearby, and they rest better knowing we are here. And together we create a field of safety that protects us all, makes this stone room more than just shelter, makes it sanctuary, makes it, for this one night, home. The hours just before dawn hold a particular quality, a deepening of rest that happens when the body knows unconsciously that sleep's end approaches and makes the most of what remains, diving into the richest, most restorative layers, and we experience this as a kind of weightlessness. Our body so relaxed it seems to have no substance, our mind so quiet it seems to have no content, just pure awareness without object, consciousness without thought. This is the sleep that matters most, these final hours when all systems completed their adjustments and optimization, and now simply rest in perfect equilibrium, asking nothing, needing nothing, being nothing, except presence. The dreams that come now are often the ones we remember, rising from deep unconscious to the shallower waters near waking, carrying symbols and stories that will linger after our eyes open, though their meanings will remain. The language of sleep not translating cleanly into the language of day. We dream of walking through the Caravanserai, but it is transformed, expanded into an infinite structure, courtyards leading to more courtyards, halls opening into more halls, each one holding sleepers from different times, different centuries, and we understand that all the nights this place has witnessed exist simultaneously in this dream space, layered over each other, transparent screens, and we can see through them all to the original earth before any stone was placed. Back, this was just desert and wild grass and wandering herds. The Caravanserai in the dream is not a building, but a living memory, growing each night as new sleepers add their rest to its collection, becoming more itself with each person who finds shelter here. We walk through centuries in moments, seeing merchants in ancient dress lying beside modern travelers, seeing children who are now grandparents sleeping peacefully beside children not yet born, and the sight fills us with an awe that has no name. The air in the hall has changed as the night progresses, becoming thinner somehow, cleaner, as if the collective breathing of 30 people has purified it through some process we do not understand, filtering out not just carbon dioxide but also anxiety, worry, fear, all the invisible pollutants that consciousness carries and exhales during rest. The quality of this pre-dawn air is legendary, among experienced travelers who will tell you that sleeping in a caravanserai leaves you more refreshed than sleeping alone. That something about the shared space multiplies the restorative power of rest. And while science might explain this through factors like humidity and temperature regulation, those who have experienced it know there is something more, something that cannot be measured or quantified, only felt. We breathe this air deeply in our sleep, drawing it all the way into our cells, and it nourishes us in ways that transcend mere oxygen. The practice of maintaining caravanserais along trade routes was once supported by wealthy merchants and rulers who understood that facilitating trade required providing rest, that exhausted travelers made poor decisions and lost their goods to bandits or bad weather, but that well-rested travelers completed their journey successfully, bringing prosperity to everyone along the route. Some caravanserais were endowed with permanent funding, the income from orchards or fields dedicated to their maintenance in perpetuity, ensuring that even if individual caretakers changed, the institution would continue. This one survives on donations and the modest fees charged to those who can afford to pay, nothing required of those who cannot. The system relying on generosity and the understanding that what goes around comes around, that those who are wealthy today may be desperate tomorrow, and the road does not distinguish between rich and poor when it comes to the need for shelter. Our body has entered its final deep cycle of sleep, the last descent into profound rest, before the gradual ascent toward waking begins, and in this cycle we process the remaining fragments of the day's experiences, filing away what is worth keeping, discarding what served its purpose and can now be released, consolidating memories and insights into long-term storage where they will be available when needed. This work happens entirely without our conscious participation. The brain's housekeeping functions operating on their own schedule, efficient and thorough, and we benefit from their labor without ever witnessing it directly. When we wake, our mind will feel clearer, our perspective slightly shifted, problems that seemed insurmountable last night appearing more manageable in the morning light. Not because the problems have changed, but because we have changed, sleep having reorganized our relationship to them. The camels in the courtyard are beginning to stir, sensing dawn's approach through mechanisms we do not fully understand, perhaps responding to the lightening of the sky that is still imperceptible to human eyes, perhaps to shifts in temperature or humidity, perhaps to some internal clock that measures time more accurately than our mechanical devices. They rise with much groaning and a ritual that happens every morning regardless of they slept, their vocalizations, complaint and part converse, communicating with each other in their peculiar language of grunts and groans and rumbling throat sounds. The camel keeper wakes fully, having dozed through the last few hours, and begins preparing their morning feed, measuring grain and dried grass into baskets, her movements practiced and efficient, and the sounds she makes doing this work become part of the pre-dawn soundscape, a gentle transition from the silence of deep night to the activity of coming day. The bread dough has reached its full rise, the bowl it rests in barely containing it now, the surface smooth and domed, and soon it will be turned out onto the floured table and shaped into rounds, scored with their traditional patterns, and slid into the oven that someone is already heating, building a fire of specific woods that burn hot but clean, creating the right temperature for baking without adding unwanted flavors to the bread. The smell of baking bread will be what finally wakes many of the sleepers, that aroma being one of the most effective natural alarms, triggering hunger and anticipation and the desire to rise and participate in the morning. We do not smell it yet, still too deeply asleep, but it is coming, that scent that has greeted travelers at this caravanserai for generations, the promise of sustenance, the confirmation that the night has been survived and the day offers new possibilities. We dream one final dream before, and in this dream, we are not traveling, but arriving, reaching a destination that we recognize immediately as the place we were always heading toward, even though we have never seen it before. And the recognition brings overwhelming relief. The journey is complete. We can stop moving and simply be, and in that being, we find a rest that makes this night's sleep seem like restless. The place has no specific features we can describe. It is more feeling than location, more state than space, but it welcomes us completely, and we understand that this is what we seek when we seek anything. This sense of having arrived at ourselves, of being whole and sufficient and home. The dream does not last long. Already the edges of waking are approaching, but it leaves behind a residue of peace that will color the entire day ahead. The first hint of dawn appears at the high windows, not light exactly, but a lessening of darkness, the black beginning to separate into shades of deep blue and purple. And though this change is too subtle to wake us, our bodies register it, hormones shifting, temperature rising, brain waves increasing in frequency, the whole organism beginning its transition from sleep to waking. The process is gradual, respectful of our need to emerge slowly, and we remain unconscious of it, still held in sleep's embrace, but being gently guided toward the surface. Our breathing changes slightly, becoming less deep, more variable, no longer the metronomic rhythm of deep sleep, but the more irregular pattern of lighter stages. Our eyes move beneath closed lids, rapid eye movement indicating dreams. The final processing material returns to claim the caravanserai, having held us through the night, begins preparing to release us. The stone walls warming slightly as dawn approaches, the courtyard birds beginning their first tentative songs, testing the air, announcing their survival of another night and their readiness to engage with another day. The fountain continues unchanged, indifferent to day or night, its work constant, but somehow it sounds different in pre-dawn quiet, more musical, each drop creating distinct notes rather than blending into white noise. The lanterns have finally exhausted their oil, flames extinguishing one by one, their work complete, and the darkness they kept at bay retreats on its own as natural light begins to filter through windows and archways. Everything is ready for morning, for the ritual of waking and washing and breaking fast together, for the continuation of journeys interrupted by night-airy pause. We have been held, we have been restored, and soon we will rise to meet whatever the road. Not yet. These final moments of sleep still precious, still needed, still deserved. The sky lightens degree by degree, the transformation so gradual that no single moment marks the transition from night to day, and we begin our slow ascent from sleep's depths, rising through layers of consciousness, like a diver returning to the surface, pausing at each level to adjust, to integrate, to remember gradually who we are and where we are and why we are here. The dreams that accompanied us through the night fade like morning mist, leaving behind only fragments, impressions, feelings without clear sources. We do not chase them, content to let them dissolve back into the unconscious waters they came from, knowing they have done their work whether we remember them or not. Our body wakes before our mind, small movements beginning, a finger twitching, a foot flexing, the shoulders rolling slightly, testing range of motion after hours of stillness. And these movements are automatic, the body's way of checking that all systems are operational, that the night's rest. We become aware of sounds, the courtyard coming to life with morning activity, the splash of water as someone fills a bucket at the fountain, the soft voices of early risers greeting each other, the clatter of wooden bowls being set out for breakfast. And these sounds do not jar us awake, but rather guide us gently toward wake, providing a soundscape that makes consciousness feel safe and welcoming rather than the smell of baking bread reaches us, warm and yeasty and irresistible, and our stomach responds with a quiet rumble of interest, hunger, making itself known after the night's fast, and this physical need becomes another thread pulling us toward full waking. We stretch beneath our covering, extending our legs long, pointing our toes, reaching our arms overhead, feeling the length of our spine, the opening of our chest, the pleasant pull of muscles that were compressed during sleep, and the stretch feels so good we hold it for several breaths before releasing. The bread baking now is the same dough we helped prepare last evening. The simple mixture of flour and water and salt and starter, transformed through time and patience into something that will nourish everyone in the Caravanserai. And knowing we participate, even in that small way, gives us a sense of connection to the community, to the ongoing cycle of care and feeding that makes shared life possible. The oven where it bakes was built by a master baker who traveled this route 40 years ago and decided to stay, contributing his knowledge to the place that had sheltered him. And the design he created allows for even heat distribution, prevents hot spots that would burn some loaves while leaving others underdone. And his gift continues to serve travelers he will never meet. His expertise embedded in clay and stone, outlasting his lifetime and extending his care forward through decades. We open our eyes slowly, letting them adjust to the growing light, and the hall appears softly focused at first, details emerging gradually as our vision clears, and we see other travelers in various stages of waking, some still deeply asleep, others sitting up and rubbing their faces, a few already rolling their mats and preparing to leave, each person moving at their own pace according to their own needs and skills. The Caravanserai accommodates all these different rhythms without imposing any single one, understanding that people wake as individually as they sleep, some needing time and gentleness to transition, others ready to spring up and engage immediately. We sit up slowly, letting our head adjust to the vertical position after so many hours horizontal, and we reach for the cup of water beside our mat, the water slightly cool now, room temperature having dropped during the night, and we drink it slowly, feeling it travel down our throat and into our stomach, the first hydration of the day. The light coming through the high windows is pale gold, the particular color of early morning sun filtered through atmosphere, and it falls in rectangular patches on the floor, illuminating dust motes that dance in the beams, thousands of tiny particles suspended in air, visible only when light passes through them drift and swirl, mesmerized by their aimless. Our body feels different than it did last evening, when we lay down, heavier, perhaps, more solid, as if sleep has returned us to ourselves more completely, and we recognize this as the gift of good rest, the restoration of substance and presence that exhaustion had depleted. We fold our covering carefully, smoothing out wrinkles, placing it at the foot of the mat where it will stay until someone collects all the coverings later to shake out and air in the sun, maintaining them so they remain fresh for the next night's sleepers. The tea master appears in the doorway, surveying the hall to see who is awake and might want morning tea, and we catch his eye and nod. Yes, tea would be welcome, and he nods back, acknowledging our request, and continues his assessment before returning to his courtyard to begin the morning's first brew. Morning tea is different from evening tea, uses different leaves, a lighter blend meant to wake gently rather than the heavy fermented tea that encouraged rest, and the preparation follows the same careful ritual, the same attention to water temperature and steeping time, the same respect for the process that transforms leaves into medicine. We stand slowly, testing our balance, feeling our legs remember how to hold us upright, and we walk to the fountain to wash, joining others who have the same intention, waiting our turn patiently, no rush, morning stretching ahead of us with all the time. The courtyard in morning light looks different than it did last night. The shadows gone, colors brighter, details sharper, and we see aspects of the space we missed in dim lantern light. A carved inscription above a doorway, a flowering vine climbing one wall, a pattern in the paving stones that forms a subtle spiral leading toward the fountain. We wash our hands and face, the water cold enough to be shocking at first, then refreshing, waking our skin, bringing blood to the surface, and we dry ourselves on the linen cloth that hangs beside the basin, now damp from many previous users, but still functional. Our face feels clean and ready to meet the day, and we look at our reflection in the fountain surface, seeing ourselves briefly before the ripples distort the image, and we recognize the person looking back as someone who has rested well, whose eyes are clear, whose expression is, whose body is ready to continue walking whatever road calls to. The three rituals we performed last night, the preparation of tea, the making of bread dough, and the quieting of our own mind, now reveal themselves as having prepared not just the space, but ourselves, not just for one night's rest, but for all rest to come, teaching us through practice what rest requires, what comfort, what peace demands. We learned that rest is active rather than passive, that it requires intention and effort, that we must create the conditions for it rather than expecting it to arrive unbidden. And having learned this, we can carry the knowledge forward, can find rest even in difficult circumstances because we understand its components, can assemble them wherever we find ourselves. The Caravanserai was our teacher, using stone and water and bread and tea and silence as its lessons, and we were good students, paying attention not with our minds but with our bodies, learning through experience rather than instruction. We returned to our mat one last time, rolling it carefully, starting at one end and working toward the other, keeping the roll tight so it will stack neatly with the others against the wall, and as we roll, we remember lying on this mat, how it held us through the night, how its simple construction really adequate, how we needed nothing more than this to rest completely. We place the cushion on top of the rolled mat, adding our contribution to the growing collection, and we feel grateful for these simple objects, for the hands that made them, for the tradition that preserves them, for the understanding that rest does not require luxury, only safety and basic comfort, and the freedom to surrender. Our small traveling bag waits where we left it, and we shoulder it, feeling its familiar weight, checking that everything is secure, preparing to walk back out through the gate and onto the road that continues beyond this shelter. The smell of fresh bread is overwhelming now, the loaves having been removed from the oven, and we join others gathering in the courtyard where breakfast is being served, Simple food offered simply, bread and tea and dates, nothing elaborate but entirely fuel for the day ahead and communion with fellow travelers. This final sharing before paths diverge and each person continues their unique journey. We eat slowly, savoring the bread that is still warm, noticing how the crust cracks under our teeth, how the interior is soft and slightly chewy, how the flavor is complex despite the simple ingredients. Yeast, having created during its long fermentation notes of sour and sweet and nutty that plain bread never achieves. The tea is fragrant and light, floral almost, with none of evening tea's weight, and it pairs perfectly with the bread, each enhancing the other, the dry crumbs finding moisture in the tea's flavor finding structure in the bread. We drink and eat and feel our energy returning, our body accepting these offerings and beginning the process of turning food into fuel, liquid into hydration, creating from them the resources we will need for walking. Tonight, we prepared the Caravanserai for rest. We prepared the Caravanserai for rest. We prepared the Caravanserai for rest. And so our night at the Caravanserai comes to a gentle close, the rituals complete, the rest received, the morning light arriving as it always does, reliable and warm. We have prepared the space together, shared tea and bread, found our places on simple mats, and allowed sleep to carry us through the dark hours into dawn. The Caravanserai will stand here long after we leave, ready to shelter the next travelers who arrive seeking rest, continuing its patient work of holding space for those who need it. And we carry with us the memory of this peace, this simple demonstration that rest requires only safety, basic comfort, and the willingness to surrender. Thank you for spending this evening here, for allowing these quiet hours to unfold at their own pace, for trusting the slow rhythm of preparation and release. If this story has served you well, if you found rest in its simple rituals and gentle repetitions, consider subscribing to the channel so you can return whenever you need shelter from the noise and hurry of waking life. There are many more caravanserais along many more roads, many more evenings waiting to welcome you into their care, and each one offers the same gift: permission to stop, to rest, to simply be. Sleep well, dear traveler.